I love that
I love
music.
the
I just
outro part of it, the little stabs at the end. They're nice. I like those.
Well, you're going to be happy at the end because we've got a little short version at the end, which we're going to. And, that music just makes me very happy,
Ah,
bopping away. How are you?
very well, very well. How are you doing, Maria? This lovely, quite sunny week we're having in the UK now.
It's sort of sunny. It's not that sunny. It's okay. I'm good, thank you very much. And I'm very excited that we're going to be picking somebody's brains today on something that I'm trying to get right myself. I
Yeah.
know you're very good in this area, but don't you just love the title, Sound Advice? Sound Advice for Speakers. Wasn't that clever? I like that.
Yeah, this is one of the hardest things in what we do as speakers. So you put together this amazing, hopefully, presentation, this keynote, and then either the sound or the lights or the tech thing just kind of lets you down. It doesn't kind of highlight you as best as you possibly can be. So our guest this week is a musician. He's also a record producer, an artist in sound, and fanatical about the performing talent he sees in others, often choosing to promote and guide those performers in their careers. From being signed to a string of record companies in the 70s to signing other acts to his own label in the 80s, he then went on to launch his own professional symphony orchestra in the 90s. But not content to stand still for long, come the noughties, he turned his attention to professional speaking and now supports the careers of a select number of aspiring musicians and speakers. QJ, welcome to Speaking Business TV.
Hello, and hello, viewer.
Great to have you with
Hello,
us here
viewer.
today.
This is wonderful. Yeah, no, thanks for asking me. It's great to be on here.
Fantastic, fantastic. And what an amazing background you've had. So obviously with your background, you have good ears, and we'll talk about that too. But how did you get into sound and sound recording in the first place? Was it something you started young, or was it later on?
Oh, very, very young. Very, very young. I got to age 5 before my parents realized I should probably be sent for piano lessons. So I had piano lessons age 5. But I mean, through my up to sort of age 10, I was interested in records and record players and then tape recorders. And by the time I was in my teens, I was recording. I didn't own a tape recorder. I remember borrowing one from a neighbor, and it had this thing called a microphone attached to it. And because I was playing piano, I used to record myself playing piano quite a lot. Um, and I was mucking about with radios, and I can remember having extension speakers and putting them all around the house, rather like we do today. We have a speaker in every room. I'm famous for it at home now, but usually it's a different piece of music in every room. Drives my wife mad. But anyway, that's how I got into it. I was just fascinated by recorded sound and broadcast sound, and music, of course, was usually the content that I would be recording.
Fantastic. And I mentioned earlier about the importance of having a good ear. Have
Mm.
you always you have got a good ear because you'll often be able to talk to, I mean, you talked to me earlier before we came on, and we'll go into it in more detail, and you could tell me what I could do with my sound, and you even knew
Mm.
the size of my room, which was incredible. Is that something that you've always had, or is that through experience and you just doing the work?
Yeah, I think what happens with any human brain is the more you use that particular sense, and the brain gets used to processing it, it's working stuff out all the time. So because I was listening to music, listening to the radio, really focusing on what things sounded like, that became more acute for me, and I could hear the subtle differences from a very early age. Um, I guess it wasn't until I actually got into having my own studio that I would tend to then kind of recognize what size a room was, or how reflective it was, or what the echo or the reverb within the room was, what we call the acoustic. But after, that was a long, long time ago. My first studio was in my parents' house, in their dining room. I literally took it over and put acoustic padding on the walls and all of that. But from that moment onwards, recording in a space like that, and then maybe going out to a church and doing some more recording there, I would very quickly become able to hear the difference in the acoustic environment and the effect on the content, the music or the sounds I was recording. And of course, you play with that. It's a completely analog environment. And if you're interested in it, you play with it. You move microphones around. You change acoustics. You record things in different places to see if they sound different. Outdoors, of course, where you have no walls or ceilings, there's no acoustic. There's just, the bird song that you record, and it's quite a pure recording, even though you're some distance from it. So yeah, I can now, after many, many years, be very good at hearing an acoustic and knowing kind of what size that room is, or whether it was recorded outdoors.
As a speaker, a little bit like a musician or a composer, the place in which you perform impacts the kind of performance that you give in different ways.
Yes.
So like in music, for example, the reason that Mozart sounded like Mozart is because it was played in those kind of high ceiling, rectangular rooms, choral music, those kind of slower notes, because anything very syncopated doesn't really work in those spaces. Or if you go to a club, like a basement club, having that low bass noise, that really works well. As a speaker, as a speaker and someone that knows about sound as well, I'm interested in how you feel speakers have perhaps had to change their performance from going and speaking on stages of conference rooms with those kind of very they have a certain kind of sound, many of those kind of rooms, to what we're doing today, where we're all in kind of like smaller. Have you seen it change how speakers perform?
I wouldn't say so much how speakers perform. I think what has changed is the awareness as a speaker that one needs in order for the sound to be as good as it should be or could be in this environment. Because if most speakers, let's face it, before the pandemic were going out and speaking on stages, and those stages, even if they were in bad rooms or had bad PA systems, we kind of all got used to that and would sit there. We were a captive audience for a start, unlike here where people can just, I should think they're going off in their droves already,
Stay with us. Don't leave. Don't leave.
Exactly. So
They can catch up.
that whole thing of just the environment, you are so right, James, and it's such an important feature of performance of any kind. The environment in which it takes place, and the acoustic of the environment, the lighting of the environment absolutely impacts on the enjoyment the audience gets. So we went in March 2020 from speakers who didn't even have to think about that. They might have had a little bit of mic technique or thought, I prefer a lapel mic, or actually I'm a stand-up, so I can use I can hold mic, to a position where actually you're performing in your home office most of the time, down Zoom, you're broadcasting on a platform, and you have no idea what you sound like to your audience. No idea at all. And so we were all on the receiving end as audience, and some of us were on the delivering end as performers. But actually, then you got this whole thing of speakers. Oh, I've got a mic. I've got a USB mic. I like this one, and I was going, yeah, but what does it sound like at the other end?
That's the
thing.
Because
not only have you got to get the sound out of your mouth into the computer, but then the computer has to send it down the internet and out the other end, and you have no idea what people are listening on. Are they listening on their phone or a tablet or on a hi-fi system? And all of those different listeners on different devices, again, would be receiving a compromised signal, an audio signal which is compromised. And because we're not as aware of sound as we are of visuals, it's easy to see, oh, don't like the color of this dress, or the lighting is not very good. People are very unaware. It's a subconscious thing, sound to most audiences.
So I'm wondering, does that frustrate you as someone that is obviously into kind of high fidelity, into that kind of sound? I remember going to a mastering session in the BT Tower in London, and just off Oxford Street. And I was working with an engineer there. It was for a pre-recorded, it was a recording. And we were having this discussion, and he sat me down. He was the final mastering stage where they put the magic. He'd just done Adele's album. Listen to her, it was amazing. He was working on the album we were involved in. And he sat us down and he said, James, please remember, this is the best it will ever sound now. Because now someone's going to download it as an MP3 file. have it in really cheap little pairs of earbuds. And he said, you're going to just have to kind of come to peace with this. Have you come to peace with that as an idea? Like, you're going to have this, you're going to work with speakers, maybe help them create like studio great sound, but that person on the other side is listening to those little cheap earbuds.
Yeah. I mean, I think with music, it's bad enough, but with speech, it's even worse, because music can hit you, as you say, if it's in the basement of a club, that boom, boom, boom is going to work. That doesn't have to be high fidelity, it just has to be loud. But with speaking, you're talking about language, you're talking about words, you're talking about how clear is the articulation of the speaker in the first place? How well do they speak? Can you hear all the consonants? I was thinking about this the other day. Consonants, which are, if you take consonants away from the English language, you can't make them out. Our language becomes quite difficult to understand because of the richness of the vocabulary that we use. It might be different in other languages, but I've listened to many online speakers when the top frequencies are missing, and so the consonants are very blurred, very hard to hear. And you think, what was that word? That sentence didn't make any sense.
It's like hearing certain dialects. Yeah, it's like here in Scotland, where you're Dunning, I'm in Scotland. We have a city near here called Dundee, and Dundee is famous for lots of things, jute jam and journalism, but it's also famous because the dialect there doesn't really use many consonants. It's all vowels, and it's very, very hard if English isn't your first language, because a lot of the things that we do as native English speakers, we don't often finish our sentences strong at the end. We don't really, those T sounds, we kind of make them a little bit weaker, because if we're speaking to someone, and most of our audiences now, we're talking about virtual, they're not native speakers, English speakers, and they're going to really struggle. And you add to that what you just said, like having some of that top dialed down, that's really hard for an audience.
It is. It's very hard. And the other thing about that is that we all suffer from hearing loss, can be from very early ages. So it's, how many of your audience are older and actually already struggling with hearing loss?
I'm older.
Yeah. I mean, the human hearing is basically from 20 hertz, 20 cycles per second, to 20,000 cycles per second. I cannot hear above 10,000 cycles. Now, that might be only an octave drop at the very top end. And actually, between 10 and 20, there's not that much extra information that would impact intelligibility. But below that, from about 3K, 3,000 to 10,000, there's an awful lot of high frequency information that comes across in S's and T's and D's and all those tight sounds that really accentuate things. The S's, the T's, the V's, the all of that. There's lots of high end in that, and if that's missing, it'll sound like there are lots of podcasts that sound this bad.
There are a lot of podcasts that sound like that. Yeah.
It's horrible.
I want to take advantage of the fact that I've got you here, because I like to have a bit of personal consultation and advice. And I'm going off piste on our questions, James. I'm sorry, but I have to take advantage while I have QJ. So I've bought the good mic. I've got a good microphone. I've got the can't remember what this thing's called. Where this thing you put on top to cover it to stop the I've got all the bits
windshield,
you need.
something like
windshield. I've got it all. I've got that, and I've got my earbuds in, my headphones in, so I haven't got any feedback. So I think I've done everything right. And yet, before we came on, you said to me, Maria, I'm going to tell you the size of your room. I'm going to tell you that you've got hard surfaces. I'm going to tell you all sorts of stuff. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I thought I'd covered it. So I haven't. What can I do? What can I do to make my sound better, please, QJ?
Well, you've asked the number one question, or rather the number one answer to how can you sound good is pay attention to your acoustics, or the acoustic of the room that you're broadcasting from or recording in. And for speech, if you go to any radio studio, the BBC or any Capital Radio, wherever it happens to be, you will find that the room from which they broadcast is a pretty dead acoustic. There are very few room reflections, because actually all you want to be broadcasting is the sound of the voice as clearly as possible, and at high a quality level as possible, because it can only degrade as it goes down the line. And at the other end, it's not going to be as good as what James was saying about mastering. That's as good as it's ever going to sound. Yeah. So your room, the acoustic in which the sound is created through you speaking, has reflective surfaces in it. And if those reflective surfaces reflect back the sound that you're creating into the mic, because they're so fast, they're what we call early reflections. The microphone can only hear that as coloration or distortion. It doesn't hear it as an echo. If you're in a cathedral or Grand Canyon or whatever, and you spoke, you'd hear the reflection as a separate kind of sound. So the brain would be fine with that, because it would still hear your voice as very clear and the reflections as something else. But in a small room, about 12 by 14, 16, this one, I think yours is about 12 by 14 feet, that is, in old money. The room isn't big enough for those reflections to be very long ones. So all you will get from the room is a coloration, which we perceive as, a bit of room sound. Now, your room sound is fine. I mean, I wouldn't worry about it at all, because
You're so cruel.
It's not making the intelligibility of your voice any less clear. You're
Thank
very
you.
clear. However, if you you could have somebody at the other end who's got a room which is the same sound, a different, I don't know what all the technical requirements would be, but you could have a room at the other end that they were listening to you in that actually argued with the reflections you've got on your voice in your room, which could cause cancellations of various frequencies. And again, it adds certain I mean, James will have more idea of what I'm talking about. I'm sorry, Maria, I'm not putting you down.
No, I know you two understand all this. I know.
But actually, this gets into it is a very complicated science, actually. And although I helped to build my third studio with an acoustic engineer who was fantastic, my knowledge is only limited as well. I mean, I know about reflections and how to cancel them out. Basically, you want soft furnishings, you want bookshelves, you want anything that stops the surface being flat, and being able to reflect your voice straight back into the microphone from a short distance. I've got a wall here, which is a ceiling, but it's curved, only about 3 feet away from the mic. So I know the reflection's coming back, but I've got acoustic tiles in strategic places that keep my sound fairly dead. And I suspect what you're hearing is mainly, or pretty much 100% just my voice.
Yeah,
you can't really hear the room, can you?
No, you sound wonderful. You sound
So
wonderful.
it'd be the same as a radio studio.
Okay.
And that's what you're aiming at.
Absolutely, especially when we have podcast guests and whatever, and we do these things remotely, but you have to rely that they've got good sound too. We're all wearing headphones and headsets, and I always say to my podcast guests, please wear a headset, and I encourage it on Zoom meetings too. And yet people don't get it. They sort of say, well, I can hear you, it's absolutely fine. Could you just explain to us why it's so important that people wear something to guide the sound into their ears?
Well, it's very important you hear yourself, because then you know what the mic is hearing. These are fed, as are yours, directly from the mic. So if I move closer to the mic, I can actually hear the effect that's going down the line, going into the interweb ether. If I didn't have the headphones on, I wouldn't be sure what that sounded like. I can come back off the mic a bit, and again, I can judge, how much of the room can you hear? And if I go quite a long way, you can probably start to hear the room now. Yeah?
Absolutely.
It's still a bit of a dead room, but it's still there. So just to monitor what the hell you're sending down the line. Why wouldn't you want to know that? You need to know the quality of your signal. Otherwise, you've no idea what the audience is hearing.
Something else I've noticed is I like to have a little bit in my ear of my voice, because what I found early on doing a lot of virtuals with going one after the other is I was tiring out my voice a little bit more than I would do if I was doing on stage, because you were using your body in a different, as we know, on a stage.
Mhm.
And if I'm on stage speaking on a big stage, I will normally ask them to do the monitors first before they do the front of house, so everyone else
Yes.
hears. So I can make sure I'm happy, I can hear myself, and it's got a good feel. And then they do the front of house and they take care of, for the audience. And
Yes.
I was finding that when doing a lot of virtuals one after the other, I was just pushing my voice a little bit more, and I had to do like more. I changed like some of my breathing, my warm up exercises a little bit more to kind of look after my voice. But just by putting a little bit of myself in my ear, that made a huge difference. Just a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about the live situation and using monitors on stage. I mean, we're used to it playing music or singing on stage, but actually as a speaker, having a good monitor is a very good idea for exactly the same reason, or wearing the earbuds.
Yeah.
I mean, singers now have these quite sophisticated fallback systems in their ears, and it really does help. I mean, they've got issues like singing in tune, but
Yeah.
to our speakers, there are similar things that we need to be in control of. It's when you use your instrument, you want to know whether you're playing a G major scale or a C major scale. It's as simple as that. It is an instrument. We respond to the voice in very similar ways to how we respond to music. And at the end of the day, I think the most important thing of all, which we haven't even touched on yet, is the emotional impact on your audience of what you say and how you say it. And without clarity, without clear articulation of your signal going down the line, again, the emotional impact is going to be altered, and very rarely will it be made better. It'll be less. And those subtle nuances, you'll hear them in the room. If you've got somebody on stage, even on a bad PA system, you've got a pretty good idea. You can feel the energy in the room. You can feel the energy of the audience around you. None of that happens when you're online. You're one-to-one, just like radio. It's a one-to-one medium. And you want to make sure that when particularly you want to be intimate with your audience, you come across as speaking one-to-one. And you can't do that if you're a mile away from the mic. Oh, hello, I'm just speaking. This is not an intimate sound. But this, dear listener, is an intimate sound.
It's fascinating, actually, because sorry, James, I'll come back to you in just a second, just on that point. So how many speakers get themselves a really good microphone and then hide it away on their desk somewhere? And you're saying you sound terrible, and then they put it to their mouths, and then they sound like a nighttime DJ.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's hard because I think in terms of like what we're doing just now, we're creating content, and we have had to make a decision in doing this as to the type of mics that we're choosing to use just now. From an auditory standpoint, the best thing for us to do is to have like mics, up close, like you were talking about there. So the audio is going to be probably the most beautiful, the warmest.
Yes.
But the nature of the way that we're communicating with each other just now, with body language and different things, we're using different mics, or the mics are being positioned a little bit of a distance from us. So I guess that's not ideal, is it?
No, and you'd never find a major radio DJ or presenter speaking miles away from the mic. I mean, they use the mic very, very deliberately. Their technique is amazing. I just saw a clip of actually Tony Blackburn, of all people, on TV or on YouTube, doing it was a promo. I think it was a scripted thing, but his use of the mic was perfection. It was like, wow, that's why it sounds so good. Yes, he's got 50 years experience, but actually the way that he knows where to be in relation to the mic, how loud to be, how the pauses and the silences are the same that hopefully we learn as speakers. But that whole package, if you can nail that, if you can get experienced and good at that, my God, you'll be amazing online. You won't have to do another live gig if you don't want to travel. How cool is that?
Yeah, wow. James.
Now, you've got a lot of experience, we were talking there, like with speech-based recording, broadcasting, working with professional voiceovers, actors, audiobooks, things like that. Yeah. How is this different, would you say, from doing kind of recorded music? And how are you seeing as things are starting to progress now, and we're having to almost have this hybrid, where do you see kind of audio going? Is it going in a good place, or is it are we all doomed when it comes to the quality of audio?
I think it's like any particular arena. You're going to get people who are really good at it, and people who are not so good at it. I think it relates to music, or rather the experience that I got from the music industry relates to this, in that in music, the voice is everything. I mean, okay, you've got instrumental orchestras, which is one kind of music, but in pop music, the voice, I mean, Trevor Horn, the famous record producer, produced Frankie Goes to Hollywood and others. He used to say, you know, the money is in the voice. You know, you record a great voice really well, the lyrics are great, the sound is great. That's what people actually want. So if you expand that thought to the money is in the voice of the speaker, it's all those things again. It's how does he sound? How does he or she, you know, what's the content? How do they speak? How do they put it together? But the money is definitely in the voice, because there's not much else that we've got to offer, actually. We can jiggle our bodies around, but actually if the content's no good, there's no message there, is there? So
Maria,
I think the money is in the voice.
Of those speakers that you've worked with over the years, who have those kind of money voices? Who have those voices that you could just listen to as a speaker all day?
Actually, I was going to mention a musician that I saw earlier this week, who for me has a phenomenal voice. I had the pleasure of seeing Tom Jones at Hampton Court earlier this week, and he has a lovely speaking voice as well as a lovely singing voice.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna, because I don't want any jealousy, and I don't want anybody writing in and saying you didn't mention me. So I don't want to have any problems with speakers. So I'm going to mention Tom Jones, who was phenomenal. An hour and 40 minutes. His voice was perfect throughout. He held the audience. It was wonderful. Pure joy.
I'm guessing his voice tone. So that's going to be, there was research done a few years ago in terms of someone's depth of their voice and how powerful they are, how powerful they're perceived to be. So I think it's 125, 95 hertz or 125 hertz. You may have to kind of help me on this one. I think it was Duke University did the study.
Oh, right.
And what was really interesting is they looked at CEOs, about 900 CEOs, and they looked at their voice, the frequency of their voice, and then they matched that to their salary and how much money they made. And there was a direct correlation between those with deeper, rounded, warmer voices and those that made money. Yeah. And interestingly, they also matched that with they found those with the deeper, rounded voices who were the CEOs of these organizations also managed companies who were on average $440 million worth more than the ones that with higher pitched voices. So there really is a money voice, you know, when we talk about that idea of the money voice. I don't unfortunately have that. My voice is probably a little bit too high. I'm doing myself a disservice here. But those kind of great low kind of, I mean, I think Zig Ziglar, it was the one I always think of as a speaker. That great Texan round. I could listen to that voice all day.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, I mean, there were so many, to answer your question, you know, who had the voices. Worked with loads of people, not necessarily with those rich brown voices we used to call them. It's probably non-PC to call them that now. But Tommy Vance, do you remember him? He was a DJ who had an incredible voice, very, very rich, dark, warm. He had a fantastic voice. The guy that we worked with, who was I thought is a good broadcaster, I've even forgotten his name. It was just on the tip of my tongue. You know how you forget these. Anyway, not Kenny Everett. His vintage. No, it's gone. Noel Edmonds. That's it.
Oh,
Noel
Edmonds.
Yes. We recorded quite a lot, and the funnest, if that's a word,
playful
gig we ever did was we got a job to make an audio tape of, because it was back in the tape days, of how to set up your train set or your Scale X trick after you'd been given it for a Christmas present. Because what they were finding was after Christmas, Hornby, who made that make those products. I still think they still do. Were getting all these returns. They were getting train sets sent back because they were damaged. So we decided Noel Edmonds would be the guy. He'd be geeky enough to want to talk about train sets. And we had this two-headed script, and it was him and one of our presenters in the studio just talking about, well, you get your rail and you stick it in here and you turn it, transformer in here and all that. He was fantastic. I mean, he had a long career, didn't he, as a TV presenter, Swap Shop and all of that. And it's no surprise because his voice, it was just very friendly, wasn't particularly deep, as you say, but he certainly stood out for me in the time that we were doing that sort of work.
Wonderful, wonderful. So you've given us some factors that will improve sound quality for speakers. Is there anything else we need to be thinking about when it comes to presenting online as a speaker with regards to getting the sound right?
Oh, I think really I've covered the more technical side. Good mic, good acoustics first, good mic second. I think I would say that just because you've got a mic that you think you like or you think is good doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be broadcasting your particular voice brilliantly. I've been helping one or two people with being the audience, because of course it's a great thing, great service I can provide to jump online. I'll be your audience. You speak to me, I'll tell you what you sound like. So easy.
Yeah. And you can tell them what to do to put it right as well, which is great.
And so people have been trying different mics, and I think that's, if you can go the whole hog and do that, because why wouldn't you? You're a professional speaker. Why would you skimp on this? There's no point in going into it half-heartedly. We have got a new challenge. Face it head on. You don't even have to spend an awful lot of money. It's a few £100 will see you right. And then, you will find there are certain mics that like your voice more than others. It's as simple as that. So don't think that just, the next Yeti or the latest whatever it is the one that all podcasters are using or the one that all speakers are using. And so that's what the one I've got to get. I don't think I know anyone else who's using one of these 4033As. It just
I've never heard of it. So just brilliant. Before we share how people can get in touch with you and also share, because you've got a bit of a tip for us, I've got one more selfish question here for you, QJ. I'm just taking total advantage. James and I both record podcasts. We record this particular live stream, and we use StreamYard to go live. Is there a way of getting a better quality recording than recording it simply straight to StreamYard, would you say?
Yeah. The sound that you're creating, in other words, from your mic, you could be recording that onto something in the same room as yourself,
Right.
Easily. You probably need a mixer to do that, or some HD converter, audio, analog to digital converter, which you plug your mic into, and it's got another line output, and you can plug that into a recorder, or even your computer can be set up with a bit of software to record that. The challenge is recording the other end. So I'm using a mixer to do that. So I've actually got two mixers in play. One has got this mic in, this mic as an output that goes straight to one channel of a recorder. And then the sound that's coming down the line from you is coming into the same mixer because they're both USB connected. And then the feed from that, I'm taking from a separate output into the other channel of the recorder. And because I don't want left and right in my ears, I'm then putting the signal, left and right signal, through another mixer so that I can mono it and I can hear, you in the middle and me in the middle. So that's why I need it. If you're happy to monitor it with one of you coming out one ear and the other coming out the other one, then you can get away with one mixer. But I'm just choosing to use two. And these are not expensive items. I mean, the mixer I've got in front of me, I think it's £40. It's nothing. But if you want help with that, if you actually want to do that, so you've got the recording, the WAV file or the MP3, although I would recommend you do stick to higher quality WAV files, and then you can turn them into MP3s later. Get in touch, because I can go through it with you and show you how to set that up and give you suggestions about what kit you might need to buy to do that. It's definitely worth it, because if you use any third-party software, if it's Zoom or StreamYard or whoever, it's never going to be quite as good. And actually, they're in charge of it as well. You don't have the control. James will know from, the music business, we like to have that master in our possession. It needs to be the thing that we own, because there's lots of copyright in this stuff as well. And you don't want it flying around in the atmosphere, in the cloud. At least I don't. You may be happy to do that, but I wouldn't.
That's fantastic advice. I understood about half of that, so I will have to get in touch. But if
Yes.
anybody like me who needs your help and to really get their sound to the next level, what's the best place to contact you?
highqualitysoundguy.com. It's my website.
Fantastic. And we're going to put a link. We're going to put a link on the Speaking Business TV website as well, so that they can reach you for your advice and help. And before we get into your tip, do tell us a bit about your podcast, because you've got a fascinating podcast. Tell us a little about that.
It's that thing of if you want to read a book and you can't find the book to read, write it yourself. So it's based on that. I want podcasts to listen to. There's probably a handful that I thought were any good. So I thought, I've got to do my own. What do I want to do? Well, I'm fed up with people being boring, talking about business and talking about, mainstream stuff. I want it to be different and a bit weird and wonderful. So what would be a weird and wonderful podcast? And it would be nerdy subjects like sound, which is my... just talk about sound. Nobody's going to listen to that, I know. But there are lots of people with subjects. I did one interview today, which it hasn't gone live yet. But it was about adult toys, not the sex kind.
Oh, not those kinds. Oh, good.
It's about adult toys. And I thought, that's great. That's such a nerdy subject. Adult toys? What's that? And it is absolutely fascinating. So there's only two criteria. The one is the person's got to have a nerdy subject or topic they love and they're really into, fascinated by. And when they come on, they've got to make it interesting to anybody. So even things like cricket, I will take. And I've got one of those coming up as well, who's got a particular interest in a particular country's cricket, which I'd hardly heard of the country, let alone known what their cricket team has done. But anyway, so it's called Nerdycast. And everything we do on it has nerdy as a prefix adjective. So we have a nerdy chat about a nerdy topic on Nerdycast.
Fantastic. And if anybody wants to apply, it's qj@nerdycast.com, and you've got to be a thorough nerd.
It is.
Fantastic.
It is.
Fantastic.
Well, I reckon there's an inner nerd in everybody, so I think anybody can apply.
James.
So Maria, actually, I don't know what's your nerdy thing, Maria. We were kind of talking about this before. Do you have yours? Have you figured out your nerdiness?
No, I don't know. I'm going to ask my man what he thinks my nerdy thing is. It's probably, I don't know. I'll come back to you on that. I don't think I have got an inner nerd. I think I'm an outer nerd.
QJ, we always love sharing a great tip or tool here every week with the audience. What would your tip or the tool of the week be?
This one's really easy. I think it's never be afraid of getting support for what you're doing. I was very fortunate having supportive parents when I was young. So they put me into music because they saw, a light there, and it was absolutely the right thing to do. And although my dad never actually said, oh, you should get a proper job, we all know how many parents out there say to their kids, oh, get a proper job, don't follow your passion or do your thing. And I think to be supportive of anybody at any age is a great thing. So when I launched the orchestra, for example, I just surrounded myself with people who loved the idea of launching an orchestra, and they became the board of the orchestra. They became the promoters of the orchestra. There are always people, you might want a social media person to do your posts and something like that. Find someone who loves your stuff and they'll probably do it for you for free. People always say, well, I can't afford an assistant or I can't afford an apprentice. But actually we in the band that we had one roadie who did it for free. We had one roadie who was paid, but the other guy, he just loved it. So you can't do any of this successful, not to a great degree of success, on your own. You absolutely can't. So you need other people. Just don't be afraid to ask, would you do that? Would you come on tour with us? And I need someone to carry my bags. where are you going? I'm going to Singapore and, you know, Malaya and America. And yeah, I'll carry your bags. You'll always find people to support you. And I couldn't have done any of this without having people who I was just, I was naughty enough to ask, please be in my band. I want you to be my singer. Really? Yeah.
Be naughty. So that's the tool. Be naughty and ask. I know we've got one speaker that Marie and I know who, on a very regular basis, he just asks his audience, I'm looking to speak in, and he'll name the country that he's looking to speak in. And he just gets floods of like, oh, you should connect with this person. And it's just that, it's asking. It's just kind of putting that thing out into the world and letting things, if you believe in the power of attraction and all those kind of good things as well, there's definitely something there.
I mean, I asked Nigel Kennedy, the world famous, biggest selling classical music artist with his Vivaldi's Four Seasons, if he'd come and play with my orchestra. And guess what? He said yes. And he didn't charge us any money. I mean, wow. If that's not a good example of ask for what you want, then I don't know what is.
I always knew he was a good bloke. So James, amazing. Of course, you've got a tool as well you're going to share with us. And I mentioned last week you like to spend a bit of money. What have you been spending your money on this time?
Well, actually, this is not a particularly expensive thing, and I'm regretting having not bought it earlier. So I've always had nice cameras and different things, and now that I'm going back and traveling as well, I needed a little bit of a camera to take on the road. I have another one I use specifically on the road. But I have this nice camera, but the problem was I was kind of doing like trying to find ways to put it up, and I ended up investing in one of these, which for no other reason probably than the name, it's called a Jobby, Joby, which is hilarious for me, being Scottish, that phrase. So it's a Jobby. It's called a Gorilla Pod. They've been around forever, and everyone else is using them. I'm just very late to the party, but they're really stable for just putting the camera on, putting in the back of the room. You can hook them around things, and it's just a great little tool. It's got a little spirit level, making sure it's the right. So if you're traveling with a camera, I'll quickly mention as well, I did have to get another microphone for this. The internal microphone wasn't quite what I was looking for, so I just got one of these. It was a Rode video microphone, and we'll put all the links for this if you go to speakingbusiness.tv. We're going to have all QJ's links, and we'll have the links to this here and also this microphone, and they're phenomenal. We're doing a really nice job, very easy to move around now. So that's my tools of the week.
Fantastic. I made you bigger there so we could all see that fluffy microphone. James, thank you. QJ, thank you so much. I'm going to go back and revisit and try and decipher the response about the recording before I contact you. It's been a pleasure. I hope you've enjoyed yourself.
Absolutely. It's been wonderful to be on. Thank you so much for asking. It's really good to get out once in a while. I'm usually stuck in my office doing strange things, which we won't go into on this occasion. But yeah, nice to be in front of the camera for a change.
Super. And fantastic. Get in touch for everybody. And thank you very much, everybody. I've got a bit of outro music too.
Take care. Bye.